one thing seemed politically unthinkable in West Bengal, that the Bharatiya Janata Party would one day stand at the center of Bengal's power, not as an outsider, not as a loud challenger, but as the ruling force itself. That is what makes Bengal one of the most remarkable political stories in modern India. Because this was never just about one election. This was the slow collapse of an old political system or order and that patient rise of new one. To understand how BJP did what once looked impossible, we must first understand what Bengal really was. Bengal was not just another state that switched governments every few years. It had one of the strongest ideological identities in India. This was the land where politics was shaped by intellectual movements, labor unions, campus debates, communist organizations, literary culture, and deeply rooted regional pride. For decades, national political trends often failed to enter Bengal in the same way they entered other states. First time, the Indian National Congress came, then the mighty Left Front, which ruled for over 30 years and built one of the India's most durable political systems. And when that era ended, many believed that Bengal had merely changed rulers, not political culture. Because Mamata Banerjee emerged as the new giant and built the All India Trinamool Congress into an overwhelming electoral machine. So BJP entered Bengal seriously. So when BJP entered Bengal seriously, it was not entering empty territory. It was entering one of the hardest political fortress in the country. And yet, the fortress did not fall because of one event. It changed because an old force weakened, while a new force learned patiently. The first reason was the collapse of the left. This part is often misunderstood. BJP did not defeat Bengal's old political culture directly. In many ways, it inherited political vacuum created by the decline of the left. For decades, the left served as the ideological counterweight in Bengal. It had cadres, discipline, local networks, and strong anti-establishment image. But once the left lost power and weakened organizationally, millions of voters who were against the ruling party no longer had a powerful vehicle. Congress remained weak. Regional alternatives failed to expand. That left a huge empty opposition space. BJP recognized this before many others. It understood that in politics, you do not always need to destroy a fortress. Sometimes you only need to become the only alternative outside it. That was the beginning. The second reason was long-term cadre building. BJP knew Bengal could not be conquered through speeches alone. It required roots, and roots are built through organization. For years, while television only showed rallies and speeches, BJP invested in booth-level networks, local committees, worker mobilization, village outreach, and district-based expansion. These were not glamorous stories, but this is how political ecosystems are created. The party entered places where it was once invisible: border belts, tribal districts, semi-rural zones, religious communities who felt ignored, areas with demographic anxieties. Slowly, BJP stopped appearing as a temporary campaign and started appearing as a permanent presence. And that psychological shift mattered enormously because in Bengal, BJP had long been seen as a Hindi belt outsider party, and BJP knew it had to break that image. So it changed strategy. The third reason was cultural adaptation. The BJP understood that Bengal would never fully embrace a party that's seen as foreign to Bengali identity. So it localized itself. It invoked Rabindranath Tagore, Subhash Chandra Bose, and regional symbols deeply respected across Bengal. It began speaking the language of Bengali pride while simultaneously promoting national political identity under Narendra Modi. This combination was strategic. Nationalism alone was not enough. Regional emotion alone was not enough. BJP blended both. It told Bengal that supporting BJP did not mean rejecting Bengali identity. It meant connecting Bengal to national power while preserving local pride. That was a major shift. Then came border politics. This became one of the most emotionally charged issues. West Bengal shares a long border with Bangladesh. In many districts, questions around migration, identity, citizenship, and border security became deeply political. BJP understood these anxieties and transformed them into a larger electoral narrative. Debates around citizenship laws, infiltration, and demographic change turned national policy into local emotion. This was not merely policy discussion. It touched identity, and identity often changes votes more than economics. The fifth factor was religious polarization. This remains controversial, but it cannot be ignored if you want to understand Bengal's transformation. BJP expanded by consolidating Hindu votes in several regions where anti-TMC sentiment already existed. At the same time, critics argued that this deepened communal divisions. But from the electoral standpoint, the strategy worked. It converted fragmented social centers into a single emotional political identity. This helped BJP grow rapidly in places where traditional caste-based politics was less dominant than identity-based mobilization. And then came a turning point no one inside TMC expected. Suvendu Adhikari. This was not just another defection. Suvendu was one of the most powerful regional leaders within TMC and one of the key architects of its grassroots machinery in several districts. He understood organizational strength, district emotions, and the internal pulse of Bengal politics. When he crossed over to BJP, he brought something much more valuable than a political face. He brought insider knowledge. He knew where TMC was vulnerable. He knew where dissatisfaction was growing. He knew which local leaders mattered. His move gave BJP legitimacy and tactical intelligence at the same time. His political battle against Mamata Banerjee in Nandigram became symbolic far beyond one constituency, because symbols can change an entire election's emotional momentum. And while BJP was rising, TMC made mistakes. The first was underestimation. For years, BJP was not treated as serious challenger. It was seen as a loud national party trying to force entry into a state that would ultimately reject it. But while this assumption remained, BJP kept building silently. By the same time, it became visibly dangerous. It had already become too strong to dismiss. The second was over-centralization. Long period in power often create distance between leadership and grassroots realities. A section of voters began feeling that decision-making was becoming concentrated and access to leadership was shrinking. Then came the dynasty perception. The growing political prominence of Abhishek Banerjee allowed BJP to attack TMC using a familiar national narrative that regional parties slowly become controlled by family structures. Whenever all voters believed it is secondary. In politics, once a narrative spreads, it shapes perception, and perception shapes elections. Then came defections, violence narratives, and anti-incumbency. Every defection weakened the aura of invisibility. Every allegation of political violence gave BJP a new narrative. Every year in power increased fatigue among some voters. Eventually, something historic happened. The left weakened too much to recover quickly. Congress remained unable to reclaim space, and BJP absorbed the anti-TMC vote. That was the decisive moment, because Bengal had moved from one-party dominance to two-force battle. But here is what makes this story extraordinary. Mamata Banerjee did not disappear. She fought. She retained massive support. She proved repeatedly that her grassroots strength remained formidable. So this was never simply the story of one empire falling. It was the story of Bengal changing. A story that once treated BJP as impossible began treating it as inevitable. And that is the lesson every political party in India studies now. No fortress is permanent. Not because one leader suddenly fails. Not because one election changes everything. But because politics shifts quietly. An old ideology weakens. A new machine grows. A rival stops looking like an outsider. And one day, history changes while everyone is still arguing whether change is even possible. And then came perhaps the most controversial factor of all, the SIR voter revision. Just before the election, Bengal saw one of the most dramatic electoral roll revisions in recent memory. Around 91 lakh names were removed from the voter list. Officially, the exercise was described as a cleanup, removing duplicates, shifted voters, and ineligible entries. But politically, the opposition saw something much larger. Mamata Banerjee and TMC leaders argued that the deletions disproportionately affected constituencies where margins were narrow. Their argument was simple. If lakhs disappear from the rolls in sensitive districts, election arithmetic changes. The matter reached the Supreme Court and legal scrutiny continued even after voting. That transformed SIR from an administrative process into political storm. For BJP supporters, it was electoral correction. For critics, it was strategic timing. But regardless of interpretation, one thing became undeniable. The voter list itself became part of political battle. And once electoral trust becomes a campaign issue, every result carries deeper controversy. And with that, the impossible finally happened. After decades of Congress, the Left Front and then Mamata Banerjee's All India Trinamool Congress rule, the Bharatiya Janata Party finally conquered West Bengal. And in a historic moment, Suvendu Adhikari took oath as first BJP Chief Minister of West Bengal, marking the beginning of a new political era.